Yep, this bad anyway.
All right. Take
Okay,
two.
so very quickly, this is the No Show. We
It's
had
working.
some real technical problems before, so we may come to the most succinct start to the show ever. My name is Joe Augustin. Over there is Andrea Edwards. This fellow down below is Tim Wade. And our guest for today is Avni Martin. She is a master coach, and she also has a leadership role in ICF, and she's going to tell us all about that right now. She talks about how she helps people rewrite the past, the present, and the future. Avni, go.
Thank you, though, Joe. Very, very quick introduction. I love that. So great to be here with you all. Thanks a lot for having me here. And so, yes, I have just recently joined ICF Global Leadership position as Global Director of Coaching Education. There we go. Tim, what was that?
That was just shedding a new light on things. So go on, yes,
that.
please.
Yeah, is that going to be the theme all day today?
I'm going to do it again, but ignore me. Continue with what you were doing.
Yes. So yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks. Over to you, Andrea.
Well, yeah, so we've got Tim back after a couple of weeks off in Australia. How did your holiday go? Was it nice to catch up with family and friends, or were you stuck in floods somewhere, or what?
No, we turned up in flood gear with like, I know what you did last summer, sort of fisherman outfits and Wellingtons and everything. We walked out of the airplane, blue skies, 32 degrees. And we're like, what? and I didn't see a single flood. There was a little bit of rain, and there's a lot of people suffering around the region. So I was just very, very fortunate to land, get into a car, drive up, and everything was fine. We experienced delays from things getting to my parents' place that we had ordered a couple of weeks earlier. Stuff like that was happening. And I've seen photos of Lisbon, and not Lisbon, Lismore. Lisbon's in Portugal. Lismore and places like that, their library, and not just all the stuff there. It's been a bit of a mess, but it was fantastic to finally, for the first time in a long time, 30 months it's been since seeing my parents, and that was really, really great. And it was just and also Australia had an unmasked policy as of 2 days before we landed, so everybody was immediately walking around with no masks on. We were masked up when we got there, and we were masked up along the drive all the way up. And we stopped at a few places and had masks on to go and pick up a cup of coffee and something. But it was bizarre. It was a really weird experience to have a mask off time. And that's coming to Singapore soon too, which is going to be interesting. Partially coming to Singapore. Yeah.
Yeah, my husband's been in Australia, and coming from Asia, where we've all worn them, we have no choice. He's just found it completely bizarre to be around it.
It was bizarre,
strange, right?
But there was, and I felt this strange sense of solidarity and respect for the people who continued to wear masks, because I just thought, good on them. They're thinking about this, and that's what I thought anyway. That's what I was thinking. But there was one little country town, not really country, it was sort of a hinterland mountain town, and there was this big guy with sort of disheveled hair, and he had a black T-shirt on that said, "Get infected, not injected," in big yellow writing. And I was like, I get it, but no. I mean, why do you want to get infected with anything? So I mean, it's probable, but it's not a mandate that I'd want to lead with. So anyway, I understand why some people do, but
I'm going to share some stories about that later. So this week, I don't know, I feel like I hit a new low with the war and what's going on around the world. And there's some huge stories from an environment perspective we're going to share today. How did you go? How are you guys how's your mental health? Because I know one of the conversations I'm having, many people, is the whole world's depressed right now and people are out of hope. How are you guys doing?
Well, I just like to say that whoever stole my antidepressants, I hope you're happy.
Nice.
Avni, how are you feeling?
I think subconsciously it did impact me, and I wasn't fully aware of how much, but I experienced a little bit of a burnout last week, and I thought it was all the work, but actually I think these things do impact us. They do weigh down on us. They do bother us because, at some level, all of us are wondering and thinking that what's going to happen? Is something going to happen? And these conversations are happening on my sofa at my dinner table with my kids who are asking, 12-year-old is asking, if the bomb falls in Singapore, how fast does it travel? What do we do? Where do we go? Do we go into the bomb shelter? Is it going to work? Like asking questions like that. Obviously, so we had to explain that if that happens, there is no shelter. It's kaboom if that really happens. And then my 5-year-old asking similar questions, he's just 5.
I think people might find it strange that Singapore has so many buildings that still do actually have, well, a lot of, I can't remember which year it was when they stopped putting bomb shelters in the buildings. Do you guys know?
Well, they haven't stopped putting bomb shelters in buildings, but they haven't made it mandatory for every home to have its own shelter. What they call it, a hardened shelter. So we still have bomb shelters. We still have bunkers at the bottom of buildings, but we don't have the hardened storeroom, which basically is designed to survive a blast better. And always pose the strange question of what happens if the rest of the building disappears. Do you have a toothpick of a remaining structure behind,
Yeah, and all these people are going to be crammed in this room with all their luggage and other things that they've just stowed in there. But
But the important thing is that in those rooms you can still receive media court radio. So that was always the big thing.
That's the final torture.
But Joe, we had a bit of a debate in our house where we are actually wondering, do these bomb shelters actually work? Do they actually work? Will they withstand, say, if there is, God forbid, but if there is a nuclear blast, how can a bomb shelter in an apartment block actually work? What's the engineering behind
giving you hope?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, and just being the smart ass who's thought about this all the time, they offer you no protection from nuclear blasts. Nuclear blasts are a totally different thing. But if we had one of those, if we were in one of those and we had one of those, like missile attacks that happened in Ukraine where it hits the side of a building, there is a good chance that in that area you at least will have some protection from that. So it's never going to stop, like a massive destruction of an entire building, but it's the kind of thing that's going to help a blast sort of like around you. It's an improbable situation, as in like most people aren't going to stick around for that to happen, hopefully. But I mean, the better place to be is actually with the larger group and in the bunkers that are pretty close to almost residential. Any residential, in fact, almost any part of Singapore is actually quite close to some sort of underground bunker, and that would be the better place to go to. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't even know about these underground bunkers. Where are they? You'll have to tell me later.
Well, there's one at the bottom of my building. Where a ballet studio and a gym are currently using them. So
Singapore is well prepared. Yeah.
It's a really strange, bizarre situation, but basically all around Singapore, something akin to, okay, everybody, class over, ballet shoes out, and then emergency stuff in. That's the way it's going to work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or in some places, they're filled currently by provision shops, which I think in some ways it means it's actually well stocked for emergencies.
That's a good thing.
So does it mean that these underground bunkers actually will withstand, they are designed to withstand, because they're underground, a nuclear blast as well? Is that
nothing? A direct hit from a nuclear blast we're not going to survive. Nothing's being built apart from a fleet of American planes. But yeah, if it goes nuclear, we're stuffed in one way or another, basically. Yeah.
Charming way to start our show.
Yes. So people know what the show is about.
Yes. Hopes and dreams crushed in a few moments.
Yeah. I've got to be realistic.
How have
Joe,
you been, Andrea?
Yeah, no, like I said, just been I'm taking on board so much stuff about what's going on, trying to make sense of it, and there's a cost to that. And
Yeah.
most of the time I'm okay with it, but every now and again it's just, it's too dark.
Overwhelming.
It's just too dark, and I have to sit in that space until I can come out of it naturally. I always say I don't resist it. I have to feel it, But I'm very good at taking on news and big news with it, and I can be very, very objective, but it's not 100% all the time. So, but once I can come back, then I know I can. When I come back, I've got the hope. I found the hope. And I feel like I'm back with the hope and at a time when the world needs hope. But people have got to take care of themselves. I always say you've got to step back from the news, but this is a great time, a great example where it's very difficult to do that. So take care of yourselves, step away from it if you need to. Look for the good news. There's lots of good news. There's lots of hope. This is a time of global transformation. Whether we go down we're at a fork in the road. We have a choice now. Which path do we take? And it doesn't have to be the dark path. And we're all part of that decision, every single one of us. So, keep hope alive. Don't fall victim to hopelessness. We can't, because that's when we lose.
Yep.
And that's Putin's goal. It's really his goal.
Yeah,
So,
I
Andrea-
was gonna say, I think you were asking me about how I felt. As you know, famously, I don't have feelings. I only have thoughts. I've been less affected by things, partly because I think I've been less informed about things. I have been following a few key interviews that with Zelensky and other people, and I am actually quite hopeful about where things are going, as in terms of where the pieces are right now. It would take. It would take someone to go, okay, all the pieces out there, and I mean just to sweep all the pieces away. I don't want to play this game, because there is enough now on the table for it to move forward. I think through his conversations with the Turkish Prime Minister, Putin, in a short conversation, actually laid out what he thought was necessary for the war to stop. And I think also Zelensky's mentioned as well, that he's okay on a few of those ideas. There's a lot going right now in the right direction. The way it stands right now is that peace, and I mean, I don't want to. It sounds like the strangest thing to say, but it's for Putin to lose the peace deal, as in like the way it's been put out now. It really is going to be something like that. Zelensky is a little adamant about certain aspects of their situation, and I would say justifiably so. But I don't think there's enough there to give Putin an excuse to say that no, they didn't want peace. I think it's out there. Enough people know about it, and I think what's going to happen also is this might be. It's a very interesting time for Putin, because what happens after this particular point? Because this is not the same as everything else that happened before. Somehow there isn't or wasn't as much of a feeling that went with Crimea. I don't know why, but it was just not as strong a sense when Crimea was annexed. This time, a lot of people care, and it's affecting a lot of people. And I think we got to get into the news details where we talk about the dynamics of it as well, the geopolitics, including what's happening with China. So I look forward to the rest of the show.
Yeah. Should we get stuck into it?
Yeah.
All right. So not starting with Ukraine, but we will be quickly getting into it. But a couple of major news pieces this week where I'm usually a little bit sarcastic, but I've got 4 rather than just 1. But let's start with Boris Johnson. I usually start with Scott Morrison. But yeah, basically the week kicked off with fury when he said that the Ukrainians, like the Britons, had the instinct to choose freedom, which was, of course, linked to Brexit. And that didn't go down very well with a lot of people. The Taliban is basically looking like it's going to renege on its promise to educate girls. And I'm seeing a lot of people very frustrated about the world not participating or not contributing to Afghan and making sure that the people are being fed. But the problem is that the Taliban have to meet these agreements, and one of them is educating girls. So do these countries say, well, we're going to ignore that for now and help the people, which means that they're going to be backing the Taliban, or do they stand strong? So here's the situation. 95% of Afghanis, are not getting enough to eat. And if that household is run by women, it's nearly 100%. So famine, starvation, the desperation in Afghanistan is at levels we've never seen. And nowhere around the world will we be seeing numbers like that. So that's a really difficult one, right? So the world's insisting that they do the right thing, especially by women. That's the deal. They're not. Do we go and support them anyway? And obviously, I think it's a difficult one, right? Have you guys been noticing that story?
Yeah, and it's like, what do you do? I mean, and now with the war in Ukraine sort of taking everybody's attention over there, they can get away with a lot of stuff. They can get away with reneging on a bunch of things that they said they were going to do. And then when you're pouring in aid and it's being directed away from where you thought it was going to go, do you stop pouring it in and then the people suffer and you're back to the whole rulers are fine and the people are suffering sort of scenario once again?
Yeah, because if the aid does get in there, is it going to make it to the people anyway, or are the Taliban going to use it as a, So it's a really difficult one. So I'm seeing the frustration around it, and I think it's another impossible situation that the world's trying to overcome. We saw Madeleine Albright died this week at the age of 84, the first ever female US Secretary of State. So the tributes are flowing out for her, and politically, whichever side of the hedge that you're on, she is a woman who, she was a first, and I think, she should be honoured for that. But another story, which I didn't have a chance to share with you guys when I sent the stuff last night, is that there's a new US Supreme Court judge, Jackson. Have you seen that? Yeah. So to me, that's been both a stunning and a disgusting part of the news cycle this week. The way that she has been treated. If you want to know what it feels like to be a woman walking into the white man's domain, watch this story. But if you want to know what it's like to be a woman of color walking into a white man's domain, even though there's a black male judge and there's what is happening to her. And a lot of the Republicans will not be endorsing her as a pick, but they think that there's enough that she's going to get through. But I've actually found it very disturbing how comfortable people are talking the way they do about a woman who is very, very highly qualified. And if you want to look for hope in this story, there's a beautiful picture of her daughter sitting behind her with a very proud smile on her face. Melinda Gates, I can't remember her new middle name, but she's been sharing that photo. But so there's good and beauty, and there's just disgust. I wish we could get the disgust out of this world. It's very upsetting. But anyway, have you noticed that, Avni? Have you watched that story? I'm sure.
I haven't watched that story, but I was actually thinking about you in all of these stories and how you feel as well, so I haven't seen that story. But Andrea, I really relate to you in terms of, you are quite a big empath, right? I think you absorb the energy of the world and see what's happening. And, I think you take it inside you. And sometimes I really wonder about, how can you, or what can you do? Or would you want to even do it if you had a way to find a way to protect yourself? It's all very good being an empath, but if it impacts you on a daily basis, then I do wonder if there are some strategies or some ways in which you might want to protect yourself.
If it also adds some encouragement as well. I mean, like this Facebook users just posted there, they're very proud of you, and I think this does say a lot about a lot of people who follow your writing and the work as well. Because what you do is without obvious reward. You're really just putting yourself out there and doing this. And I know if left to me, this show would have died a long time ago. But you are such a powerhouse, doing something that you feel is important, and I think it's getting out there.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I was actually talking to my husband about that very topic last night. I am very good at protecting myself. I do have strategies, and it's just something I've learned to do, right? So don't worry about me, but there are times when it does have an impact, and it's the cost. There's always a cost, and if you accept the cost, then you get get on there, because to me, knowledge, it's about knowledge. We've got to, and it's about looking around the stories. You know, I see a lot of people with one opinion, and it's one possibility. It's not the truth. It's one possibility. And I just really want to encourage people to look at it. If you can look at stories from every angle, then we have a chance to overcome some of the issues that we face. So whoever wrote that comment, thank you. That was very lovely. Should we move on to the Ukraine?
Yes, and you know, before we move on, I wanted to add that this whole idea that you shared around looking at things from multiple perspectives, you've hit the nail on the head, Andrea. If we all can just take that one thing out of life, and just that one thing out of life, just that one thing, if we can look at things from multiple perspectives, then there will be less fights and wars within families, within husband and wife, within neighborhoods, in employment and workplace, and also the world at large. You know, if people can just look at things from more than one perspective, not just your own perspective and what you want, but how about what other people want, and where are they coming from, and what is their truth like? What does the world look like from their angle? I think that would make such a difference. Just that one thing.
Yeah, massive. All right, so let's get on to the Ukraine. So the first title is War and Weapons. So there's been a fair bit of coverage on this elite drone pilot squadron that are doing, inflicting some pretty severe damage on the Russian troops. So they're sending the drones out at night and taking out a lot of the big tanks and the big vehicles. We saw a Bangladesh shipping company is seeking $22.4 million from insurance claims because a missile struck one of their ships. I also saw a few days ago, Russia was showing off one of their big warships, and that actually got bombed by the Ukrainians as well. But one of the stories that I suppose, I don't know if you guys saw this, a few years ago, Putin went on TV and he announced these new hypersonic missiles that Russia now has, and they have now been used for the first time in war. So these are billed as unstoppable in combat. And we know that, you know, every war we're looking at, you know, ways to get a leg up on our on the enemy, right? But these missiles can hit any target on Earth anywhere within an hour. So ballistic missiles already move fast, but what makes hypersonic missiles even more powerful is that they glide in the upper atmosphere, and they're also highly maneuverable, so they can be sort of moved around as they fly. And obviously with your ballistic missiles, they don't have that flexibility. So that's one of those stories that, you know, it's a level of elevation that I suppose maybe they're just testing them because it's the first time they're being used, and a lot can go wrong when you do use these sort of weapons. So maybe they're just testing them. They're not testing them on towns. They're on sort of facilities. Right. Another one, we've seen some stories where the Ukraine army is actually pushing the Russians back. So that sort of gives us a bit of hope. And yesterday, the Doomsday plane was reported as flying over the English Channel. So there's a plane called the Boeing 747 Night Watch, which is an American fleet. And this is a plane that is capable of withstanding nuclear blasts. So that answers the question. Don't go to the bomb shelter. You need to get on the Night Watch. And yeah, so basically that was on the way to Europe yesterday. Kind of feels a bit concerning, feels like more of the escalation around the whole nuclear conversation. So that wasn't great news. Did you guys have a look at any of those stories?
Yeah, I looked at the hypersonic one, which was pretty amazing. 6,000 kilometers an hour is amazing. I mean, it's
2 kilometers a second.
Yeah, that's lightning. I mean, how would you stop it? You know, that's why they're calling it unstoppable. So
it's also very hard to aim. That's the other problem with it.
One of them is not actually. One of them apparently it can go do lots of loops and bounds, and then you can still direct it. And so that goes in the outer atmosphere, and then it can do a lot of little circles, and then it can be directed exactly and very precisely, which is scary.
Yeah.
And it does that to confuse people about where it's going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the air defense missile systems just aren't ready for something like that. But you know, Putin announced this a number of years ago, and it's here. And obviously, everyone's known it's coming, but now it's been used, and I don't know. We just keep marching towards war all the time, and it's not what we need.
There's big money in weapons. That's
Well,
the problem.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And it's war is good for people who sell weapons, and they make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, every time I hear news where Ukraine is making progress, like the first piece of news, you know, where the elite drones are now helping and making progress, I felt good to begin with, but immediately I felt like, well, hold on a minute, you know, if Ukraine is making progress, then Russia, you know, with their ego and wanting to win, they're going to take out more toys, right? More toys of mass destruction. They're going to, you know, because they want to win. So if somebody is doing better, then they're going to try even harder. So I always feel scared when, whilst we all want Ukraine to win and we want people to support them, of course, and we are all trying our best to support them, I really do fear every time I see that support increasing, that what's the consequence of that happening now? And sometimes you just wonder, you know, what is the best way to now stop it, right? Like stop it now before it, you know, before it just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. And when do you stop it, you know?
Yeah,
there's no winner here, right?
There is.
It reminds me of this story about I can't remember which comedian it was who told the story, but basically like his friend told him, like, if you get attacked by a shark, you know what you do is you punch it on the nose, right? So what he did was he just thought about it, go like, well, what happens is now you've punched the shark, and the shark is like, hey, listen, I was just going to be swimming by, but now that you punched me. You know, it's about escalation, right? As you talked about there again, and the same thing as well. People have asked me about why doesn't the Ukraine just go ahead and really punch back into Russia, right? And that's the whole thing. It gives you that license. It gives you the story that says that okay, now they've attacked us. Now we can do what we, you know, now it's true. You know, all those different things. So it is a very strategic thing or tactical thing, responding to violence or responding to an attack. How much of an attack back do you give? Because it's gonna lead to the next thing. You're absolutely right.
Joe, that's a really, really interesting conversation and point. It's like the art of war, right? How far do you go, and what games do you play in war? And you know, I learned Taekwondo, and my Taekwondo teacher always says, you know, that basically, if you are gonna get attacked, I know you're on a beach or on a back street, and if you're gonna get attacked, then your best shot is take the person down, you know, with one punch. And this is how you punch, right? You just take the person down. And I know it sounds really aggressive and violent, but giving an opponent, especially in this case, a very immature opponent, right, who's just started something that's tragic for everybody, including all the Russians, an opportunity to keep escalating. I had a slightly more controversial opinion right from the beginning that, you know, if you're going to oppose something, oppose it really well. If you're going to do something, do it really well. So if you're going to stop someone, stop them right now, and stop them really well, and stop them really fast. And I know it means a total escalation pretty fast, which sounds scary, but what if it escalates there anyway? And it is just gradually building up, isn't it? With everyone taking out their, weapons. You know, I have got one up for you. I've got one up, and then, you know, and they're getting support from other countries behind the scenes, I'm sure. You know.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for. I must say, I feel sorry for the Russian people, because they're the ones, especially the ones that were mobile and able to travel around the world and everything else, because now all of a sudden they're bad guys again, and they've been fighting this sort of branding since the Cold War or before, and it's like, you know, we had the World Cup in Russia, the world embraced it, everybody was loving us. It was just, you know, it was, the doors are open, and now this.
Yeah.
You know,
Boris, we were doing so well, Boris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we've got a lot of Russian friends living here, and they're having a really tough time, and they're being treated badly because of the decisions that the leader of their country made, and it's really quite heartbreaking, because these are good people, and none of them want what's going on, you know. And I mean, I've got a humanitarian section, but before we move on to that, the environment impact of the war, which of course is always going to be front of mind, but the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, I don't know if I'm getting better at saying his name or not, but he's really, really concerned about the turn to fossil fuels because of this war. So basically, you know, like we've talked about it before, a lot of countries, especially in Europe, they're looking at alternative sort of energy sources so they can get off the dependence of Russia. But if they then turn around and establish these new supply chains, there's obviously going to be legal commitments, which, you know, is definitely going to push us past the Paris climate goals. Basically, you know, I'm finding it really interesting at the moment. A lot of media are talking about the fact that if we don't get this under control, we're going to pass 1.5 degrees global warming. Well, that's already set in, you know, so I don't know why the media is still talking about there's a chance of not hitting 1.5 and when we're currently on track for 3.2. But with what's going on and what's been going on with this war, we're looking at emissions are set to rise by 14%. So we're not even, you know, keeping it at a steady level. It's going up, and this situation is really making it a lot worse, which, you know, we know. And his other concern is that countries are going to be so committed to finding solutions to their energy needs that they're either going to neglect or kneecap the policies that they've got in place to reduce fossil fuel use. So this is a real risk that this war brings of really accelerating the global heating. And when we get into the environment section, you'll know that we can't be sitting in this space. We just can't. So that's a concern. We can talk about the environment a bit later, but a couple of other stories that I think are really worth talking about. We know that Belarus is a partner with Russia, right? But there's people in Belarus that are actually cutting
Belarus. Is it?
Belarus, sorry, the
Yeah.
Belarusians. Who are cutting Russian supplies by train. So they're actually going in and destroying the train line. So they're cutting off their supplies. Another article in The Guardian that's worth reading, those on the right who loudly praise Putin have now fallen strangely silent. And obviously they're talking about people like Nigel Farage and Trump. But one article I really want to recommend everybody reads is White House avoids Trump attacks on Russia, Ukraine. So basically, Biden, right from the word go, he's not the sort of person that just wants to talk about Trump all the time. He's not the politician that's going to be constantly digging at past policies that have led to the moments that we're in right now. But behind the scenes, the Democrats are saying we've got the midterms coming up. You know, Macron has come out and said in 2024 Trump could be back in power. So the Europeans don't want to go all in with the US, even though they like and trust Biden. They don't know what's coming up. And, you know, they basically are saying we need to remind people how much Trump undermined Ukraine's security and welcomed, you know, Putin. They say welcome Vladimir Putin into America's election system. And I think that's incorrect. I think he was in the election system and Trump benefited from that. But I don't think the goal was for Trump to benefit from it. It was to create division, as we talked about last week with Andy. So, but basically the Democrats are looking at not taking a passive approach, but it's difficult, right? So we kind of want the politics of gentlemen and ladies now after all those years of ugliness, but we're still fighting against ugly politics. So, you know, showing the better side isn't necessarily going to win. I don't know. What do you guys reckon?
I just keep wondering, you know, what would our world look like and what would wars look like if, you know, if there were more female leaders, you know, and I'm not a feminist. I'm not a feminist in that sense, but I do wonder that if majority of the world leaders were females, how will they fight, right? And what do women do on a typical day? What do women do when they don't get along? And what do men do when they don't get along? Men will throw a punch, whether it's a verbal punch or a physical punch, and women will probably talk behind each other's back or just stay away from each other, something like that, right? So there is a difference in the you know, art of war with men and women. So not being a feminist, but I do think that what was that? There was a big noise. I don't know if you heard that.
Why do you say you're not a feminist?
It was somebody against you not being a feminist.
Yeah, me.
Right.
All four of us are feminists.
Everybody's a feminist.
So I don't know what the
Exactly.
definition. No, I mean it's just that I'm a peopleist is the point. right? I'm for I'm a humanist. I'm a peopleist. I think men and women are both equally valuable. And for me, a definition of a feminist is somebody who basically perhaps thinks that only females should, I guess everyone has a different definition, only females should rule, or should be one way. But so that's why I'm saying I'm not a feminist, I'm a peopleist, I'm an equalist. It should all be equal, right? And if being an equalist or a humanist makes me a feminist, then I'm a feminist. So it's all about definitions. But bottom line being that I think there is, it's just how guys fight, and it's just how girls fight. If you just look at that, right? When there is a disagreement amongst men, what happens? And when there is a disagreement amongst women, what happens? There is a difference. And women would generally tend to preserve, nurture, which is why our earth is called Mother Earth, right? There are reasons for these things. I think women are less likely to launch missiles and bombs. That's my bottom line, that's just less likely to happen.
That
speaking on
brings us
behalf
to
of
the
my
end of
mom.
Father Time.
Yeah, but
Say
those
that
who
again,
create,
Tim?
Speaking on behalf of my mom, I tend to think we do cherry pick, as in the sense that I think we do look at always the best of everything, right, and the worst of everything. Right now that we have really the worst of the male traits showing up. I think we've got great male leaders, and I know I step on I'm getting into very dangerous territory when I talk about what we also had bad female leaders. But we do cherry pick, and we do tend to look at those stories in that particular from that particular perspective. I think what there is actually is a lack of recognition for what are good leadership qualities in the broader society. I think what it is that we tend to be drawn to certain things like strength. These are all human traits, by the way. It's just a weakness of the kind of creature that we are. We're no different in many ways from some of the other creatures in the animal world who respond to the same sort of cues. And what we need to do as human beings is to rise above that. Because if we just went with our animal nature, then the force or those forces that are strong tend to be those things like brute strength and stuff like that as you grow to be an adult, where there's
hair, by the way, is one of them for political leaders. Yep, they tend to choose men who have hair. I know it's weird, but it's one of the things. So Biden had a lot of plugs put in.
Well, look, I just want to add Sam's comment here, and like we all are feminists, and feminism, like when women say they're not feminists, what they're doing is that they've it's like what Putin's done. He's divided the world and divided opinions. He's divided families, right? There was a huge movement against the feminist movement. So when we say we're not feminists, we actually allow the people that wanted to destroy the feminist movement to win. Feminism is not about women being at the top. It's not about women dominating. It's not about any of that. It's about equal rights for all. And all of the problems that we face in the future, we need 50-50. So if we want to look at leadership qualities, because like you say, Avni, I'm a humanist too. If we want to look at qualities, I mean, if you shouldn't be able to get into politics unless you rate very high on the EQ scale. You shouldn't be able to get into politics if your parents didn't love you. Like how many broken leaders get in, and it's literally because they need to be loved. We saw it with Trump. We've seen it before. But I think EQ should be one of the measures rather than IQ, which is pretty much the only measure. Although with George W. Bush and Trump, you could sort of question that, but. To me, it's just about we've got to start pushing, and I think leaders should be younger, a lot younger. Maximum 60, and we need shorter terms, but we need 50% representation, because you can't get the full view. I don't care if it's a male or a female, but you'll never get the full understanding of any issue if you don't have all voices at the table who come at things from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think
So-
that's a great idea. If there could be an international law passing that, every leadership will be shared by a man and a woman together, that will be great. And if the definition of feminism is along the lines of it is about equality, of course, absolutely 100% we want equality. That's the whole point, which is where I was coming from, that I'm a humanist. I think both sexes matter equally. And yeah, so
I'm not sure about shorter terms, though.
sorry.
Andrea
I
was
think there
saying
should be
about
limits
shorter terms.
in
I think-
democracies.
You know what would be really interesting, though, is depending on if you win by a landslide, you get a longer term. And if it's really close, you get a shorter term. And so you got to do something.
That
You know?
we know power corrupts, right? So limit the time.
But we'll end up with a stock market philosophy, which we already kind of have in a lot of countries, which is we just need to do enough stuff to get elected in the next time, rather than focus on the long-term things that are really required, which is where some of these countries that really end up with a one party dominating can get a lot of stuff done. But the reliance is on them having good leaders, and if they don't, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So
well, you remember my idea from a few shows back, right? We should make public service much more consequential, right? Where if you run for it,
that's right.
you go for it, and if you lose, okay, that's fine. But if you win, then you have to do the job well, or you die. That's one of those things. You have to have tried really hard, and people have to agree that you tried really hard. I think
there was an episode.
One of my
there's an episode
crazy
on
ideas.
there's an episode of the Orville. So it's got some really good ideas. It's a stupid show, but it's got some really good ideas. It's like Star Trek written by the guy who wrote Family Guy. And there's this one planet that they get to where everything is done by social media polls. So executing people is all done. What do you think? And it's like Fox News going, what do you think of this person who did this? This is horrendous. Let's get him on the show. And then he comes on the show. So what do you do that for? Oh, I don't know about that. And you can see the votes against him getting executed going up. And then all these decisions were made based on if people liked you or not and how you came across. And you had these people grooming you to present well. I mean, the same thing happens in politics, weirdly enough, now, but it hasn't quite got to the voting on everything. Although, Joe, the consequences of I'm not so sure. I would agree with you that not everybody who leads should have the same structural package at the end that supports them so liberally as a result of bad leadership and stuff. But then it's who's to judge on what that is the tough part, because the opposition coming in would say strip him away of it all, and then you'll be just flipping all the time. So, or her. Yep.
Well, ultimately, it's a market, right? It's a market of opinion. In the end, if we believe in democracy, then we have to go with that. And then if democracy might not be the actual answer as well. I mean, the Council of Elders is something which I am not. I think there should be something like that in terms of how management's put into place sometimes. A council of elders who have to go to 6 monthly mental assessments with a psychiatrist as well. It's a series of checks, but there is a lot of wisdom to having wisdom. So I like the idea of younger people being in charge of being leaders, but you also need to temper that with older minds and older souls, because I think
I agree to an extent, but I think the whole boomer dominance in the voting has been a big part of where we are. I've talked about this before. Until 2028, Gen X won't have more power than their parents in voting. So we've got to really count on the Gen Z and the millennials to get out there and vote, and they're not, because they're so disenfranchised by the whole system. But I actually think we're heading towards the great renaissance. If we survive this time and come through this time, it's going to be another period where we actually rethink it all. So democracy has become corrupted. Why has it become so corrupted? What's capitalism's got part of it. The demographics are part of it. There's so many aspects that are part of it. And I think we've just got to pull it all apart and work out how do we put it back together so that the majority of people can flourish in balance with nature, And if we can do that, we have a hope of moving forward, right? And if we don't, well, we're going to head towards more and more catastrophe.
So the thing that I
Andrea,
have a challenge with this is when we do something like that and look at things that way and assess things. What do we do when we stop and go like, oh, we're the problem?
Yeah. Well, we are the problem.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I know. So the thing is, like in terms of leadership as well, that's the thing, right? I mean, I don't know if we can rely on leaders to step aside when they go like, oh, okay, I'm the problem, right? I don't think that's and the thing is, what I sometimes feel is that we have evolved. Society has evolved to the point right now where we tolerate what is intolerable. You know, it used to be, like I said, you know, it used to be very simple. If you were not a tolerable person, the tribe would leave you either out to die, or if it was a more violent tribe, it would just say, okay, enough. Or you'd have, you know, somebody would take care of business, so to speak. And that used to be okay, but it's not anymore. Now we allow, you know, things to happen. We always kid with our kids and say, like, you know, the trouble with us as parents is that we don't eat our young, right? There's a thing where some animals they do that. It's like, you know, if this particular youngster is just too out of line, sorry, that's the end of that trip for you, you know. But we don't have that anymore, so we don't have that sense of like.
I think that's
are you
probably
promoting cannibalism by any chance?
I think it's
Well, you know, we don't have to eat them.
What are
I mean,
you really saying?
I'd like us to see. I'd like to see us really rethinking our societies, because a lot of what's wrong in our world is at the societal level, right? And we're not taking care of the most vulnerable. I hope you guys have watched something of Trauma, the story of trauma, or whatever it is. It's an amazing show, a documentary that's available. But I think if we could put at the center of our world that children are brought up in environments where they feel loved and safe, that generation that comes from that will be completely transformational. But we also need to take care of the adults who are not feeling loved and safe. So we need to take care of the addicts. We need to create societies where there's a space where they can go, where they can either recover or not. But we need to recognise the trauma in our societies. You know, in Australia there was a report of the teenagers, highest ever consideration of suicide, attempts at suicide, and self-harm from the last couple of years. So we've got a problem with our youth, and eco-anxiety is off the charts, right? So I think what we've got to do is we've got to create more compassionate societies, and we've got to rebuild from there. And the societies that we've got, which is I'm doing all right, screw you, you know, that's creating the problem that we need to overcome. So, you know, the selfishness, the individualism, you know, that is very dominant in Western societies. It's just really apparent to me that, you know, we've built something and it's broken. How do we fix it and get to work on that? So, Avni, I know you're going to have something to say. You go.
Yeah, no, I think what Joe said, that we are now in a society where we're tolerating, right, bad people or bad ways of being. But I think, we're basically tolerating bad decisions, bad ways of thinking. It's not people who are bad, it's just the way we think sometimes, isn't it? Our thinking is completely flawed. So I think I would relate to that we are tolerating terrible thinking, and otherwise that needs to be corrected. And so, Andrea, earlier you shared around leaders should have a high, you know, IQ or EQ, essentially. I totally agree with that. That would help. We also shared that, you know, if somebody has not been loved, then they shouldn't be allowed to be a leader. I would disagree with that a little bit. What I would say is that if somebody hasn't had the love when they were young, then they need to get the healing. They need to get the processing. They need to get some therapy. They need to fix their brokenness. So that they can be more whole and complete, and they can be more loving people, because you cannot give to others what you don't have within. I get your point, right? You have to have love within, and you have to have peace and sanity and togetherness within. Then you can create that externally and give that to others.
I totally agree. So I was being a bit facetious about Trump, right? But we need to work out how to heal people, and there's a lot of people in our societies that need to be healed. And if you need to be healed, you shouldn't have the opportunity to go into leadership, but it doesn't mean you couldn't go into leadership. But you've got to do the work first.
Yeah.
But
So I think
one of the
psychological profiling would be great.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. Human impact. I don't know if you guys have seen the price of living has increased by 14% for Russians. And I know a lot of people are not necessarily empathizing with the Russian community because they see it as Russia is at war with Ukraine. I don't. I see it as Putin and his very small little trusted circle. There was a really interesting piece where somebody who's been rejected from that circle was put into a video clip, and then it was a fake video clip because he didn't want everyone to know that this guy had been kicked out. But anyway, so the suffering for people, and there's a lot of people in Russia who remember that time, and so they feel like they're going back, to the long queues, lining up for sugar, buckwheat. They're the two main things that everyone's talking about. The other thing is, US has officially accused Russian forces of war crimes, and that's a big call. It's not a call easily made if you've looked at past wars. So there's going to be some consequences that come out of that. But let's move on to the economy because, Joe, you might have some points of view. But India is looking to buy the cheaper exports from Russia. And, of course, a lot of people will think that that's a bad thing for India to do, but they've got to take care of their people. So cheap energy supplies is obviously important. So they're looking at a rupee-ruble exchange. So this is all part of the global economy moving away from the US dollar. But there was another article in Bloomberg, which is basically Xi's changing tact, and the China stock market. There's exodus basically. Is meaning he's going to be turning things around and looking at things from a different perspective. Joe, did you have a good look at that one? Because I know you're closer to that than I am.
I did. I mean, I think it's always about what happens when you get pushed up against the wall, right? I mean, everybody can say, I don't need you. But if something as fundamental as a capital market is based on participation and based on investment by a larger number of people, you fundamentally do need people to invest in that. So China was very much exposed because despite their closed off, how closed off they are in certain areas, financially they were actually quite open because a lot of investment came from overseas into the Chinese market. And what happened in and around Ukraine was it made it a bad investment to stay invested in China because of the risk. It actually was the risk of it. It wasn't about the optics or whatever it is, but it's just bad financial risk. Do you want to have your money riding on something that could turn south pretty quickly, especially if you're not aligned the right way? So that's what basically happened. So the market went into a bit of a free fall. Usually what happens when a market falls on its own, and things are as business as usual, funds will come in and pick up bargains because it's a good time to pick up stuff that's really cheap. But China had made itself in a sense uninvestable, so that support wasn't coming in. And it was affecting a lot of people. It was affecting a lot of the Chinese population that is invested in the stock market, and that's how some wealth is being developed as well and lost to a great extent. I can't remember the number now, but several hundreds of $1 billion. I think I can't recall the number, but I know that the Alibaba, for instance, lost a ton of value, and that it wasn't going to be without consequence. And this is also about how it's working for Xi, because elections are coming up. And even for him and the Chinese people who obviously talk about how it doesn't matter and don't care about it, seem to care about it. So that's I think it's not a good look as well if things have gone to crap and the person in charge gets re-elected. It's not a good look, even for the party, right?
Yeah, right. It's interesting. It just sort of feels like it's going back and forth in China, like last year with all that property group that was, and then Jack Ma and Alibaba, and it just feels like it's kind of all over the place. So some consistency would be good. There was one article, an energy embargo against Russia is unsustainable, from Germany, and this is I'll put it in my weekend reads, but I want you to have a look at it because to me it's a classic example of a headline that doesn't match the story. Because in the story they're basically saying we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're steadfast here because we need to be, because the most important thing is stopping the war. Another really interesting piece was the title is Asian gas buyers puzzle over Putin's demand for payment in rubles. Sorry. And this is Japan and South Korea, who don't actually understand how it's going to work because they do all of their trade with Russia in US dollars to buy their energy. And now they're basically saying you've got to do it in rubles, but they haven't got the financial system set up to do that. So that was kind of a quirky kind of little story. Did you ever read of that one, Joe?
I didn't read it, but I know that there are lots of things happening now in the back alleys, right? I mean, not back alleys, but when you look at the world as it is right now, and you have a fundamentally still valuable commodity that is needed by various people, and its price is getting high on the open market, and you have someone who has the ability to supply that, right? It's just market factors that are at play. It's gonna be attractive to try and get hold of some Russian product, right? And will you do it? How will you do it? Well, if you're not allowed to use US dollars, you're not allowed to use the usual banking system, then you have to try and figure out another way. And so there's another guy who says, I can get you a deal. You just have to do it this other way. It gets to be worthwhile. I mean, if you look at the price of crude, of fuel, just in terms of oil in general, it's imperative because again we're addicted to energy. We need it in all its forms. Even economies where they have diversified and have different ways of using energy, of getting energy, they still need fundamentally oil, right? So. Here you have that valuable commodity. You have the impetus to try and figure out a deal. Now you got to figure out the other way, and the only other way now is okay. We can do it in this currency. We can do it in rubles, right? We can also do it in crypto, but that's a whole other thing. But it's another possibility as well. There's a way in which transactions can happen which don't require the banking systems. There are ways and means around it. I was just listening to a podcast the other day about Iran, because Iran's been on the receiving end of sanctions all of these past few years, ever since Trump overturned the nuclear deal they had and then reintroduced sanctions. Iran's been getting around the sanctions by financial means. I mean, what they've done is they've set up all kinds of different companies offshore. It's the usual thing you see in movies, but basically setting up different ways to deal, and so they can deal with you not as Iran, but as a company that is related to a company that is related to Iran. So it's all the deals that whenever there's money to be made, or at least money to be extracted from the system, someone's going to figure out how.
Yeah, exactly. And Avni, I got your message, so don't worry. What we're going to do is we're going to move your theme section up, and but we'll just get through the rest of this Ukraine stuff, right? So first of all, information war, news, propaganda, blah, blah, blah. Lots of that going on, of course. There's a couple of pieces on the journalists and the media that are in Ukraine at the moment, and because it's in Europe, a lot of freelance journos have sort of jumped in, and they're right in the heart of it. So a guy called Timothy Fadek, who is got 20 years experience on the front line of war. He put together an article which is advice to photographers in Ukraine, and it's basically like pretty grim. Another article, 20 Days in Mariupol, the team that documented the city's agony, which is an AP news piece, and it's a very, very, very powerful piece. And it's also about the stories that they were getting out and how hard it was to even get the stories out in the first place because the whole city was destroyed. But if they didn't get those stories out, the world wouldn't have known what was going on. The hacktivists that are operating all over the world, Anonymous is in there. They seem to be doing their job. And just today, Russian regulator has blocked Google News, so another one that's basically out of the game. So just some big pieces that are going on in Ukraine at the moment. I recommend reading Western Agents Seek to Get Inside Putin's Head. It's a really, really, really interesting read. And if you're someone that likes to get into people's heads, you'll find it a fascinating read, because they use this story of him being bitten by a rat that he had in a corner. And obviously the analogy is he's now going to be potentially the rat in the corner. Another one, It's Our Home Turf, the man on Ukraine's digital front line. So the youngest member of Zelensky's parliament. So I don't know if you noticed this, they're doing these little feature stories on the people within the inner circle of Zelensky, and they're heroes, right? So last week I shared one about the guy that was running the railway. This guy is running the digital frontline campaign. He's an ex-entrepreneur, ex-technology exec. He's a really young guy and he's doing amazing work. And another one in the New York Times, how will the Ukraine war end? So there's some big reads. So anything else?
What was the conclusion in that New York Times one?
So you always ask me to do that. If I didn't prepare that one, I'm just recommending that one.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I'm just recommending it, I haven't prepared for this because I read it a week ago and it's not front of mind.
Sorry, you did say not discussing it, so I shall withdraw my question with respect to.
Okay. I haven't got time to read them all again on the day, but So one of the reasons we invited Avni here, not just because she's an amazing thinker, and as you can hear, as you've heard so far, we have great conversations, right? But how we think and make decisions. And of course, we're all wondering how Putin's thinking and making decisions right now. But this is your area of expertise, Avni, and we'd love to just pass it over to you and help us understand.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. So yes, I've developed a coaching system called the Happy Coaching System, where how we think and how we make decisions is actually at the heart of it. So my theme and my contribution for today is, how do we not be Putins? How do we identify the Putins within us, and how do we not be Putins, and how do we be happy? And so how we think and how we make decisions is, for me, one of the most important thing that the world should really focus on, because every single thing we do, every moment in our life is a result of some decision that we made, and sometimes an indecision, right? A decision to be here, a decision for you to do this show. So everything in life and every moment in life is a result of decisions that we all make, or an indecision, like I said. And so the art and science of decision making is one of the most critical skills that I feel every child, man, woman, and especially people with power to influence should be actually taught at schools, colleges, universities. So I think one of the criteria for a good leader would be, can they actually think straight? Can they make decisions that are in the best interest of the world, because they have the ability to impact everyone? So I think the issue is that our human thinking is flawed by its design, and evolutionarily, these flaws help us survive. They did help us survive. But as we know, too much of anything isn't good, especially in the wrong place and at the wrong time. And when I say flaws, I mean things like our inability to basically see things for what they really are. We only see things what we want to, right? We only see what we want to see based on our filters, our biases, assumptions, our inner drivers, needs, insecurities, and our inner brokenness or togetherness, and especially our emotions. So the impact of our emotions on our decision-making is absolutely infinite. And all of our decision-making is flawed as a result of it. And for most things in life, often it doesn't really matter. But there are times when it does matter. And it actually really matters a lot, which we are now seeing a possibility of a potential unstoppable outcome that no one, not even Putin, would want himself. He would have not gone out there thinking, I want, such a bad war that, could escalate so much. But will he allow it to happen? Yeah, because he's not educated about the art of decision making. So yeah, that's what I really wanted to put on the table and share and discuss. What are your thoughts on this?
So one of the things that sort of become pretty clear, not just about Putin, but about leadership, is leaders who surround themselves with yes men. So, and that's one of the things that seems to be the case. You know, there's only a very small group of people around Putin, especially, you know, with this war. When the decision was made, people didn't know, not even the army generals knew or the military generals knew, right? But even in business, it's the case. You know, you get these leaders and they're surrounded by sycophants, and you know, you see these people, they'll kiss up and kick down. That's why I always describe it, the office bullies. So
Nice.
how do we deal with that? You know, how do we, because that's a big problem, right? Not just in politics and in business and in societies too, right?
Yeah. It's actually a bias, Andrea. You know, you basically described a bias called the leadership bias. Now, if everyone went to school and they educated and learned about the leadership bias, just they learned that there is a human flaw, and the human flaw is that we follow our leaders blindly. When a leader says jump, we say how high. And that is a human flaw. You know, why should we do something that is not in the best interest of everyone just because one person says that we should do it? So it is flawed thinking and decision making, but we do it. So I think if people, even at teenagers, they were taught all these things, then when they go into leadership positions, whether it may be organization or elsewhere in a political stage, they're going to recognize that yeah, I've learned this, and we've all learned this, and all of us know about this. And if we all know about this, it's common knowledge. It becomes who we are. And we are not going to make a bad decision just because somebody says that we should make a bad decision. And yes, we recognize that we should follow our leader, and leadership is all about working together in a cohesive teamwork. But to what gain? To what end? You know, how clear are we about our end purpose? You know, so I think one of the issue is that and I think that's an issue with Putin. And this is where I'm saying that we all need to recognize a Putin within us, because Putin is an example. He's a metaphor for bad decision making. But we all have a Putin within us where we are not clear about our end game, our end purpose. I think there is so much lack of clarity about what is it that we really want, and if what we really want, is it long-term or short-term? And so I think if all of these things are educated to people, that, hey, become really clear about who you are. You know, are you an individual? So just what you said earlier in the show, Andrea, are you an individual? How do you relate to yourself? Who are you really? Are you an individual, or are you a collective? Do you just think for yourself, or do you think for the entire team? Do you think for your own selfish good, or do you think for the greater good? Do you think short term, or do you think long term? You know, do you think about what I'm going to possess by doing this action, or do you think about the legacy you want to leave behind? You know, how do you really think? Right? And who are you really? So that relates to the, you know, in the happy coaching system, that relates to the why part of the happy coaching system, which is, who are you? You know, how do you relate to yourself? And what are your needs? And how clearly are you really related to your inner needs? Is it about power, possession, and persuasion, or is it about security and stability? You know, so where's your vision? You know, how far are you really thinking, right?
Yeah. I've got another one, unless you guys. So one of the big issues that I see as well is the disconnect between leadership and everybody else. So people called it, I've seen it referenced in publications like The Atlantic as like the MBA mindset. So basically, you know, right across Silicon Valley, and that's been my industry for a long time, there's these leaders like Zuckerberg who are completely disconnected from the reality of the majority of people on this earth. And and to me, that's no different to a Putin being disconnected to the reality, you know, of the Russian people, of the Ukrainian people. Like there's a distance. So I mean, when you talk about we've got to educate our kids, 100% agree. But I don't know, how do we get that conversation happening more? Like, you know, when Bill Gates goes to Africa and he's doing amazing work, but he can never really truly see what's going on, because he's always surrounded by people that are going to shield him from everything that's going on. So we can never see life Like if you've ever listened to the podcast that he did with this lady called Rashida, I always felt that a disconnect between reality.
What was that noise?
I don't know. Somebody's got some music. Does that make sense? What I'm asking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know where that music came from, but it was nice and loud.
It's all right.
Yeah. So that disconnect, again, Andrea, a lot of these things, even a disconnect of that sort is coming down to a bias, which is basically, I have a list of all these biases right here. It's essentially to do with one of the C biases. 1 second, please. It slipped my mind, but there is a specific bias that actually confirmation bias, which is essentially what is in front of you, the data points that are in front of you, what you see all the time is what you believe in. You know, so
we've got it. Just a minute, Avni. We've got a bit of a problem with a bit of a crackle with your microphone. So, your microphone's just here, yeah?
Yep. Is this okay?
That's better. Yeah. Try and keep your hands away from it because it crackles. Yeah, it's confirmation bias.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Yeah.
I want us to hear what you got to say.
Yeah, it's essentially around the whole idea that whatever data points you see in front of you, you will believe those data points. So for example, if we see in the news a certain piece of news all the time, then we will relate to that news more than something else that's going on that's equally prevalent or equally important. So these people who are disconnected, essentially they're disconnected because they are not seeing the data. They're not seeing the dots. They're not seeing the reality for what it is. They're shielded from that reality. Because everything in life is like, I think everything in life is like data points, like they're dots on a piece of paper, and people see what they see through their filters, right? So if there are infinite dots on a paper, all of us pick up on certain dots from that paper based on our filters. And our filter could also be just the position that we hold. And if we are really shielded from a certain position, we're not going to see all the data points on a piece of paper, all the dots on a piece of paper. And if you only pick certain dots, let's just say that Tim picks up the dots that look like an elephant and he joins all the dots together and he creates an elephant. And Joe sees, I don't know, a rainbow, and Joe basically draws a rainbow out of it. And Andrea, you see a table, for example, and you draw a table out of it. And I draw something else out. I see a baby and I draw a baby out of it, right? We all see different things given the same data points. Right?
But if we surround ourselves with each other and have a conversation, we've worked out that we can see the elephant in the room. And it's obviously the baby's room with unicorns and change table. And I think that's where Bill Gates might be surrounding himself with intelligent people, for example, whereas others may be surrounding themselves with people who are just saying yes out of fear or yes out of the consequence of what they could lose, which is what I think we have the ability to make good decisions, but I think sometimes we're presented in a scenario where we are assessing the consequences to ourselves. So we could be in the workplace and a boss is coming down saying, you got to do this and this and this. And we do it because ultimately they hold control over our purse strings, to a degree. And then that'll come back to what are our values that we're basing our decisions and our behaviors on. And I think we've seen a sustained disassembly of value structures in society to go towards a do whatever you want society, and we're paying the consequences for that now.
Yeah.
By the way, this joke would have worked about 2 minutes earlier, but here we go. Can you see the elephant in the room?
Just move back a bit.
Oh yeah, I got you. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I really have to say, I absolutely love what Tim just said, because Tim, even though you're joking, you hit the nail on the head. It's just about all of us seeing each other's perspectives in life, right? That's it. If we can make a decision in that way, where we can see other people's perspectives, we can see something beyond what we think is right, because everyone holds on to their perspective as, gospel or the truth. Whereas, there are infinite number of truths. If we can just sit in each other's spots and look at each other's truths, we debate, we talk about it, and then make decisions, and that will be great. And this is why we need more women in leadership.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
What?
No, but it's absolutely right.
Yeah.
No, but it is. It's the different perspectives. It's like, someone who's grown up in India versus someone like me who grew up in Australia. But, the white man gets a big bagging these days, but the white female perspective is different to the white male perspective, right? So we've all got different perspectives and different backgrounds, and we came in different families and blah, blah, blah. And I'll have people sort of presenting arguments to me, and this is the truth. And I'm like, well, it could be. It's one possibility. When we were trying to make sense of why did Putin go to war, I reckon I found 50 reasons from really, really respectable people that have thought a lot about this. And every single one of them had a point of view that was worth listening to, but none of them were 100% right, because the only way I could find out the truth is to talk to Putin. And I don't think you'll pick up the phone. So,
Call ID. Oh, it's Andrea again. Oh.
I'd love the chance to sit down and talk to him and get inside his head.
So, Andrea, I think that there is a thing, right? Again, there is a nail on the head right there, is that if we look for reasons, there will always be reasons, right? So if people are looking for justification for doing something, there will always be a justification for doing things, no matter what, right? Uh-huh. If anyone does something, right, that person has a reason to do it, right? And other people may not agree, but they have a damn good reason to do it. Now, so there will always be a reason. Now, the bottom line is, how do you take that perspective, those reasons, and let's just say all the reasons are just perspectives, and how do you balance perspectives with your purpose, right? What is the end game? So I just think that what the world is really missing, and what we are sometimes really missing, is, the long-term end game. Like, what is the long-term end game? What does Putin want to leave behind? Does he want to leave behind, millions of families with broken children and broken hearts and broken families? Or does he want to leave behind a better legacy where there is peace in the world? Like, what is his long-term goal, right? Even if he gets what he wants, which is Ukraine, he gets what he wants, at what cost? Right?
I don't think he wants Ukraine. I don't think that's his goal. That's not. He's not looking to take the whole country. He might want to take bits of it, but I don't know what
he wants. Whatever he wants, Andrea. The funny and the crazy and the ridiculous part of this is that he's going to die soon, right? The funny and the crazy thing is that this man who's doing all this stuff to impact so many people to get something he wants, right? He's anyway going to die and leave it all behind anyway for dust. Right? So it's just such insanity that we work so hard to get something and we're going to leave it all behind anyway. So be careful what you wish for and be careful what you go for, right?
Yeah. Tim's obviously cracking a bad joke. I can tell by the look on his face.
Yeah. Cancel all my appointments. Nothing is worthwhile anymore.
You're going to leave it all for dust anyway.
It's not going to die soon.
Yeah,
well, I'll tell you what's been getting me this week is I've ended up singing out loud Tim McGraw's "Live Like You Were Dying" several times. I don't know if you've heard the song.
No, don't sing it.
It's a country song, so it's all about feelings. But it's a story that starts off basically this way. It's about a guy who looks at his X-rays and he's found the news that he's basically got something wrong with him medically, cancer or something like that. And he's telling this guy next to him, and the guy goes
I think you just got to sing it. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Ding, diddling, 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 ding, ding.
There's a whole plot, and country music doesn't all sound that way, Tim. Yeehaw, yo.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't all have a banjo.
It's basically this guy's got all this stuff, the bad news, he's got the bad X-rays, all the bad news. So, and the guy goes, so what did you do? And he goes like, well, I went skydiving. I went. I can't remember the words right now. Yeah, But it's about doing all the things you would do if you knew you were going to die, and the different things that you would do. So for different people, it's different things, right? So I don't know if
I want to ride horse with shirt off, invade Ukraine. What else?
Yeah. No, I think that's what it is, right? As you get older, you don't only have a bucket list; you have a F it list, right? You and I think what Ukraine, what Putin is doing right now is he's at that phase where I think he's running out of time. I think he knows he's running out of time, and he wants to get some stuff done. And he's tried to get it done a different way before, and right now he's just entered that stage. And I think we all this is the stage where I'm trying to make sure that guns are legal by that time, so that my wife can shoot me when I get off my lawn stage, right? I want to be removed when I get to be that cantankerous. When I've got no more F's to give, I think that's a very dangerous stage, and I think maybe that's what might be happening, right? I mean, who knows? We might find out all this is because he had a really bad medical report, and he's got some
that's one of the
limited time.
stories. Yeah, that's one of the stories.
He's
sick.
69. I mean,
yeah.
No, I think the worst thing he's got right now is he's opened up an envelope and been like, I have news. Apparently, you are Putin.
No, I didn't get it.
No.
Did anyone get it? No.
Like a Putin being a cancer or whatever like that. Yeah,
I
Putin being
mean,
a cancer.
And
let me rephrase it for a modern audience. What's the problem? Oh, it says here you're Hitler.
Yeah.
No, we get it. Yeah, I think that's funny. Yeah, of course.
But I mean, Hitler was mad. Hitler was mad. He had syphilis, right? And they weren't able to cure syphilis back then. And syphilis was one of the ones that actually literally set you mad. So, but we've got precedents all through history. The Roman emperor sort of I love my history, but Julius Caesar. Like, think about what he did. I mean, he completely. He completely changed the whole, he brought the emperor into the fold, so when you're talking about legacy and, there is precedence of that, but I don't know, we're about 100 years now out of that world. And it's like, why is he trying to bring us back into that, that way of being and his people are suffering so much for that. That's what I'm like, it just feels like such an incredibly backward step. What's going on? It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, and if people are really suffering, even on ground level, we hear about all these sanctions, etc. But I just had a real life experience of it recently, where I was trying to do a very small business with a Russian company who play chess, who teach chess, and I was trying to pay them to teach my children chess, and I liked them. I did trial classes with them, loved them, beautiful teachers. When it comes to paying, I couldn't pay them. And I tried paying them multiple ways, and everything was just frozen out. And I felt so bad because they're really nice people. I met them online so many times, really, really sweet people, and they cannot get paid. So, so I mean, it's real, right? And that's a first-hand experience. What was that?
Sorry, COVID. COVID.
Okay.
All right. Avni, thank you for your, offering us that conversation. I know that you got to jump off in about 15 minutes, so just make sure you say goodbye. But that was, it's really important to me. My biggest takeaway is we got to get some self-awareness into society. People are really, they're not self-aware, and we come across it every single day of our lives, right? The work we got to do, the work within, and we've got to understand ourselves, like you were saying, in our motivations. But I'll just go and make sure you go and check out Avni. She's awesome. I love her. She's a beautiful person. So go and check her out. But let's move on. So COVID, we are now apparently on entering the fourth wave of COVID. It's taking off in Europe, and based on the sewers of the US, they are expecting the next big one to kick off. The severity is unknown. I know. I know. I tried to think of ways to say it, but there's no other way of saying it, right? We'll keep an eye out because, of course, 62% of the American population are vaccinated. 20% have had COVID, so that percentage would increase the figures. But they're expecting a fourth wave to sort of start consuming the country soon, but they don't know if it's going to be a national thing or if it's going to be more local. So we'll keep an eye. But good news for the three of you and sitting in Singapore. You can go outside. You can take your masks off. You can go out for dinner with 10 people.
Yep.
And I think that's really cool. And I'm going to be in Singapore from the 6th of April for a week. So looking forward to catching up.
Really well.
Yeah.
That's my birthday. Thank you for
Love
coming.
to see you.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like New Year's Eve now because everybody's got a dinner party with 10 people coming over, and we're all waiting to choose which one might be the best. You know what? That was the thing that was coming from Australia, coming back and having to put it back on was like, I'm okay with it, but it felt, and it feels natural having it on now, but it felt nice to not have to wear it and just see people's faces again, full faces again. So it's a partial lifting because it's outdoors only. Indoors, you still have to wear them, but it's still a step in the right direction, which is good. And then a lot of the establishments with limitations, they can start to open up again and have more people dining, which is going to make a big difference to food and beverage and a lot of those micro businesses that are surrounding them, because people go to these locations to eat, and then those businesses around them get business. So it's the ecosystem of small business, I think, is going to do well. And that was one of the things that the Prime Minister mentioned, that it's hurt the measures have hurt some of the businesses, and it's time to help them out, which is good.
Yeah, nice. Well, in Thailand, they're saying they're going to make it endemic from July. And basically the measure is when COVID deaths are 0.1%, it can become endemic. And so basically from July, no masks, no mandates, nothing. Everyone can come in and things are just going to return to normal. So July feels like a long way away. So it feels like you guys are sort of progressing. But then we look at this potential fourth wave and, still, I think it was 44% of the world's population still haven't received any vaccinations, which always leaves the doors open for mutations, which it was better than I thought it was going to be. So, we're still not at the end of it. And there are a couple more reports on, we've talked about long COVID, and this is one of those topics that we're not going to know the answer to this for some time. But Oxford study asked, can COVID-19 make your brain shrink? And basically, yes, even if you got a mild form, they showed less grey matter. But the other one is evidence grows that vaccines lower the risk of getting long COVID. So those studies are starting to come out. And obviously when the mutations and variants come, sometimes that has an impact on that because things change. But anything else you guys are noticing?
I was going to say the weird thing about that is if your mental capacity is compromised in some way because of long COVID, then weirdly enough, the guy wearing the T-shirt of "Get infected, not injected" it would have that compromise, and all the people watching the news channels that are giving him a single message that is confrontational, divisive, and problematic, and our call for an increase in self-awareness, particularly in those in parents, particularly for parents and leaders of and influencers of people around them, which is pretty much everybody is an influencer of the people around them. But the adults influencing and the parents and the teachers influencing the kids have a huge responsibility for changing the game in generations. But if the gray matter, if our brains are shrinking, then we're gonna feel the ramifications of an exacerbated, divisive, argumentative community as a possibility, which would be, if depending on what the impact is. If we've just said we need more self-awareness and it's going to impact our brain, depending on how it impacts our brain, of course, that's going to
be the base assumption is that your brain shrinks, it's bad.
What was that again, Joe?
No, I said the base assumption is that if your brain shrinks, it's bad. Although I haven't met a very bad dog for a long time, so I think we don't know exactly what the result of a shrunken brain might be. You might get a more peaceful society.
Well, I went to Brunei and there was lots of shrunken heads.
Sorry, Avni.
It wasn't good for them.
Yeah. our brain is like a river, not a rock, right? It's constantly changing anyway, so it's always growing. So even if it shrinks, it can recoup. So eat some more nuts, and our brain really does grow all the time, and it does change all the time. So it's okay. It's okay. If COVID
Really?
affects our brain, it will rebound. Yes.
There's hope
Yes,
for
we're
Tim.
Go back
changing
to
all the
drinking
time.
alcohol then.
New. No.
So they're talking a lot of the ones
well,
that they're
you
talking
stopped for
about.
many other reasons.
A lot of what they're talking about are sort of lesion type scenarios on the brain, which are similar to one of the brain diseases that are lesion based. So it is going to have a big impact, and they don't understand what it's going to look like. And it's obviously not my area of expertise, but I don't think it's a case of the brains will recover. I think there is some pretty serious neurological damage, potentially coming. So
a Legionnaire's disease? No. Okay. So yes. No, I'm working it. Okay.
you two are not in humour form today.
Any moment now, we're going to see Avni physically take out a ripcord and pull and go like, I gotta go.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to do that.
And don't blame her.
Yeah, I do need to go, So thank you so much, Andrea, Tim, and Joe. It's been lovely hanging out with you. Thanks for having me. But yeah, I think the message is, we just need to work on our awareness, right? Awareness, and then adaptation, and then application. Awareness of, who we are, our long-term purpose, and how we think. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, darling.
Yes,
Appreciate
take care.
having you here.
See you. Have a fabulous weekend, you and everyone. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye,
Take
Avni.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks. See ya.
All right, so let's get on to some happy news. We're going to talk about the environment and society. You ready?
Okay.
I'm prepared to hear happy news about the environment.
I'm not so sure it's happy.
No, there's none. Okay, so the big news is going to happen at the end, but let's start with this one. So climate change, wildfire smoke linked to Arctic melting. So keep an eye out for this article. It's a very, very, very interesting article. So there is a thing called black carbon, which comes from fossil fuels. So it's the sooty stuff that comes out of your car, cooking. So this gets picked up, it goes up to the Arctic, and it makes the ice black, and therefore the ice melts, right? So it's not a good thing. They know all about it. They know, how bad it is. They've known for a long time. There is another one, which is called brown carbon. And this is from wildfires. So basically what's happened in the last few years with all these raging fires in right up north in Australia, Portugal, Siberia, the US, we've seen them all. What they're doing is they're dumping all of this brown carbon into the Arctic, which is increasing the melt that we're experiencing. And originally they thought it was only contributing to 3% of the global warming, but and I think these figures are really confusing. Basically, now that they're actually really starting to really research it, they're saying the effect of brown carbon aerosols over the Arctic is up to about 30% of that of black carbon. And they're saying it's contributing twice as much to the warming effect of brown carbon in the Arctic than was coming from fossil fuels. So up to 30% of black carbon, twice as much from brown carbon. So I wasn't really sure what they were saying, but basically brown carbon's not good. The more fires we have, the more it dumps in the Arctic, the more the Arctic melts, the less sea ice we have, the less reflection back of the sun back into the universe, and that's what's called a feedback loop. So it's a really, really concerning story. And like, in Australia, for example, so they're not investing in the infrastructure to fight fires, but they are spending on nuclear submarines. So I would suggest that it might be a good idea to sort of refocus the budget to getting the fires under control, because anytime those fires rage the way, and like Texas has got like 130 fires going off at the moment, which feels so early in the season for me. But every time those fires are burning, they're contributing to this feedback loop. So we've got to listen to the Indigenous communities in our societies and work out how to get these fires under control, because it's not good. Do you guys read that one?
I take heart that the world's solutions might be in the form of turning ourselves into a big disco ball, because a lot of it's about reflecting the sunlight, the radiation back up, right? So how about that? Let's go 70s.
Well, we can start
in
with
the
Born to Be Alive.
yeah, in the IPCC report, they're talking about painting roofs white and sort of light grey. So that's one of those momentums that we could start. I think Denise was saying if we put what do you call the solar panels
Solar
on top
panels?
of roofs, that will reflect it back, but it doesn't. The solar panel gets absorbed into it, doesn't it? Do you guys know how that technology works?
Well,
Denise will be
there's-
listening to this.
I don't know exactly how that would work, but I think there is a certain amount of energy that can be reflected back as well. So not all the energy can be harnessed for electricity anyway. There are different kinds of solar panels that even those that harness the cold energy, which is a really bizarre idea. But yeah, I mean, reflecting it back up is the big thing. Actually, the problem, and I was being facetious as well. The problem really is that it comes down below our cloud cover, and then it gets absorbed. What we really want to do is to reflect it back before it gets down to the earth. That's the ideal thing. So we should have cloud cover, and that would give us that. But so that's just me being silly and stupid, and
No. Well, I was
Friday
reading
age.
something. I haven't had a chance to dig into it, but there's more moisture in the upper atmosphere than there's ever been. But yeah, so this idea about I was talking to Steve about it, like painting roofs white, right? So you go to Greece, it's all painted white, right?
Yeah.
Would we need to focus on painting our roofs white in the areas of the world, like say up in the north, in the the northern climates, right? So we're to reflect the ice back, to reflect the sun.
Yeah.
Would that help with the ice melt? But if we did it all over the world, would that be a good thing too, or would that sort of, because there's so many of these ideas that we talk about, but how do we do it in a way that doesn't mess with the balance of nature, right?
My guess is to get a movement to get everyone to paint their things white. I mean, I think it seems to not be addressing the real problem.
No, I know, but these are, we're not. We need to do all of these things, right?
I'm just thinking that that article. I mean, it's a strange title. It really, for me, it should be the other way around. It should be Arctic melting linked to wildfire smoke, rather than wildfire smoke linked to Arctic melting. I was like, how does the melting have any impact on wildfire smoke? But it's the other way around. So for this particular one, it's what's scary about this to me is that climate change was the Arctic, the ice is melting. It's going to cause sea levels to do this. But as the temperatures get more extreme, so it's sort of climate extremities, and we're getting these fires a lot more prevalent and early, like you said, in particular seasons. So there's going to be a lot more of them. And then that's exacerbating the ice melt as well. We're now starting to see the ecological synergy is not the right word, but the
ramifications.
The co-ramifications, I guess so, where one is now impacting the other, which is impacting the cycle is starting to get impacted in a significant way where it speeds up all the projections, because most of the projections were ice is melting at this rate, so we can project it'll be gone by then. But actually, we didn't factor in the fact that the wildfire smoke is going to speed it up. And so at some point they're going to go, everything could be a lot sooner. And
and then I think this is Janae's, but I can't say the name. But while the black surfaces of solar panels absorb most of the sunlight that reaches them, only a fraction, around 15% of that incoming energy gets converted to electricity. The rest is returned to the environment as heat. So there you go. A little bit of education. So that's a big one, and it's not the biggest one, right? But some news. The SEC unveils proposed climate disclosure rules, which is going to be an important thing if it gets through. The climate activists in France and around the world are now using signs from Don't Look Up. So the guy that wrote that movie is feeling pretty happy with himself. Swiss Re, which is an insurance giant, basically is saying they are going to restrict cover for new oil and gas projects. And the World Health Organization said that no country on the earth currently meets air quality standards. Now that in itself should be a major global story, but to me, it's a small story in the bigger one. And Australia's carbon credit scheme is basically largely a sham, and there's a whistleblower that's talking about it. Last week, I mentioned UNESCO heading off to the Great Barrier Reef to do a study of what's going on. And the headline is, "It's not supposed to be white. One of the Great Barrier Reef's healthiest reefs succumbs to bleaching." And this breaks my heart. But basically what they're saying is widespread bleaching during the cooler temperatures of El Nino or La Nina has left scientists dreading the damage that could be caused by the next El Nino. So this is a really big, heartbreaking story, because when the reef goes, just the ramifications from that, just life in the ocean. So I found that really sad. And as an Australian, obviously, I find it sad. So if you're in Australia and you have an opportunity, go diving, go snorkeling on the Great Barrier Reef, because maybe it won't be with us for too much longer.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Any thoughts? Yeah. But the big story this week, which happened just after our last session, last week, was hot poles. Antarctica, Arctic, 40 and 30 degrees Celsius above normal. So This happened at the same time. At this time of year, Antarctica is heading towards its cooling period, because it's just past the summer, which is why the scientists who will be studying the Doomsday Glacier usually leave around about this time. And the Arctic is typically slowly emerging from its winter as the days start to lengthen. So this heating is unprecedented. Here, there's a word again. So just a couple of things from this news story, because it's so big, and it's probably the thing that contributed to the way I've been feeling the most this week, not the war. They basically, the scientists are saying this unprecedented event could signal faster and abrupt climate breakdown. And I know that's hard for people to hear. I know people really struggle with that, but this is where we are. It could disrupt all of our climate systems. The danger is considered twofold. Heat waves at the poles are a strong signal of the damage humanity is wreaking on the climate. And the melting could also trigger further cascading changes that will accelerate climate breakdown. George Monbiot, how do you say his name? The Guardian journalist. I always say Monibot, but it's not. It's Monbiot. Anyway, I thought he summed it up beautifully this week when he said, "It would be unbelievable if it were not true, and it is terrifying beyond words. The war we have waged against the natural world has, in climactic terms, just gone nuclear." And one more story. Microplastics have been found in human blood for the first time. They travel around the blood, they travel into our organs, and they have no idea how that is going to impact us. So basically, we're in a pretty bad spot. So not good news. But it's never really good news on the climate, but time to act, guys, in a really, really, really big way.
Well, yeah, and the last thing we need is a war.
So Zelensky's call for protest, to me, it's not a protest against that war. It's against war. It's against the war machine. It's against the fossil fuel industry. It's against all of these industries that are holding on for what? The global economy. Yes, it's going to be hard, and we have to get ready.
Did you see Schwarzenegger's video?
Yeah.
Did you talk about that last couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was brave and powerful and really interesting. And then somebody else was Bill Burr, I think, was writing. If everyone just stopped, said no, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
It would let the people who are having what he called it, let these people in power having temper tantrums with each other go and figure it out some other way rather than sending everybody to their death.
Yeah.
And because we do have bigger global issues that require bigger levels of leadership. We need bigger leaders, not tall and with hair, but bigger in their care and concern for the global population and not just their little neck of the woods. And those that are able to play on a global scale and play together to be able to handle the problems of our time in a more mature and responsible way, because we feel insignificant and powerless to do anything about it. But as a group, we are quite big.
I had an epiphany last year, especially after COP26, and just seeing the outpouring of grief from the scientists and the journalists that have been covering the issue for decades, right? And I had an epiphany last year. Like, the leaders of the world will never be capable of fighting the fight they need to fight until we're all convinced that that's the fight that we need to fight. Because, I was reading an article that if we want to really face up to climate change, right, we should only be on I think it was a short haul flight once every 3 years and a long haul flight once every 8 years. Now, so for people like us who live in different countries to our home country, that's not a possibility, right? We should only buy 3 new clothes a year. That's a sort of, we've got to bring it down, and until we accept. And so I think we have to accept our role in it and change our behaviors on a major scale, especially the top 10% in the world. And we're all part of the top 10%. And it's a big thing. It's a big change. But when we do that, when we understand our individual contribution, we then vote for leaders and we support them, because it's going to hurt. It's going to be more expensive to buy a TV because we're not going to manufacture TVs at the rate we're doing them at. We're going to make higher quality things that last longer, and they're going to cost more. All the shit that's in our societies, all the crap, the single-use stuff, it needs to go. And that's going to impact whole industries. So we have to accept our part in it. And then that's kind of one of my missions is, getting that message out there. That's, I'm focusing on us, our role, because until we accept it, the leaders can't do their job. And I think that's the impasse.
Well, the story I heard out of...
Sorry, Joe, just before you do that, I need to jump off because I'm about to go and host a B1G1 event. But I think you're totally right. I think we need to make these big changes. The cool thing about organizations that we can support that are doing the right thing are with groups like, we need to do something ourselves. We need to make a decision that becomes part of our business, part of our lives, and part of our organizations. Sorry, Joe, to interrupt, but it's because I need to go to do this because it's starting in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. And so I better go. I am going to put the link in because anyone who wants to join, you're more than welcome to join. It's a virtual study tour, and our focus is on education. And we're looking at 3 particular organizations that are coming and sharing. One of them is Chameleon Association. One of them is Sabre Education. Another one is Child Aid to Eastern Europe, where Ukraine is really going to feature in some of the stuff that they're going to talk about too. So it's, but they're really rewarding ones where you get connected with the organizations that are on the ground and doing the giving, and you're able to connect and see what they're doing when your money goes there, and you make impacts to change things for good, which is great.
Yeah, so B1G1's amazing. Sorry about that. All right, Dom. Yeah. Have a good weekend.
You too. All. Bye.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, seeing as everyone's going to be leading our show for that show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but we can wrap it up. Anything keeping you distracted at the moment, Joe?
I'm just doing my trading. Is
that what's keeping you up at night?
It's keeping me up way too late. I've been sleeping at 5 or 6 in the morning, much to my wife's chagrin. But it's one of those things. But I'm trying to find a better balance with that. But it's one of those things. It's just I've got to figure a way how to not be consuming so much of it. I'm basically what it is I'm consuming the market, and the market's consuming me in return.
Yeah, it sort of feels like what I'm doing with consuming knowledge of the moments that are going on in the world, right? It consumes you sometimes. So you kind of...
You know what? One of the things that I've been trying to deal with, and I think I've been trying to figure out how to make it work for groups in general. I think part of the problem that we have, besides not taking things seriously enough, is we take things too seriously, right? I think that's kind of the balance that we have to figure out. There's some things that are really important, and yes, they're going to be important, but at the same time, we also need to go, okay, and I can't do that much about it right now, so there is not much of a point in this moment for me to be so drawn into it. And it's a
Yeah.
hard balance, because at some level you're going like, this is really important, yes, but I need to sleep, right?
Yeah.
And there is a balance. We do have to figure out this thing about ourselves versus the big picture. We can get consumed by the big problems of the world and not look after ourselves, and then we can't do the thing that we need to do in the world to make it better.
Yeah.
The story that I was gonna share actually is about how, I think the environment has to become like this particular idea in Germany. In Germany, apparently, and this is a story someone told me about. In Germany, if you try to cross the road when it's not the green light for pedestrians to cross, other Germans will stop you, right? And they won't stop you because it's the law. They'll stop you because the kids are watching, right? And I thought that's an interesting idea, because what we need to do is figure out how certain things become the thing you don't want to do. You need to make things unfashionable. You need to make things wrong so that people know other people are watching. Now, one of the ideas that I had when I was trying to help people stop smoking in Singapore was a campaign that basically said, when they see someone smoking, they just point at you and go like, "Oh, hey, stupid." It's an idea that basically is about recognizing bad behavior, or recognize, not that smoking is a terrible behavior, but I'm trying to, you're trying to make the right thing happen. So something that as you're benevolently manipulating, you have to figure out different ways to make that happen. And I just thought, how the answer really comes to this: how do I make it awkward for me to do the things that I do because my kids are watching?
Yeah, I like the idea of behaviors when your kids are watching, because there's a lot of adult behavior in the world right now that is not a great example to our kids, and sort of guaranteeing that they're going to grow up and to be massive turds, right? If we follow the behaviors of what we're seeing around the world right now. But
it's a good thing we have an emoji for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll wrap it up. So last night was my last chance of watching TV without having to factor my husband in. So he's landed back in Phuket, and I'm looking forward to seeing him after nearly 3 weeks away. And it was touch and go if you could even get on the plane. Like, it's really, really hard to travel right now. But but this week I've decided to watch this show, which was called, I'm not ashamed to watch these sort of shows, but it's called Sweet Magnolias. And it's about these three Southern besties. And it's really, really sweet and very, very Christian. But it's all diversity. And everyone's just really nice to each other. There's a couple of bitchy people in the mix, but it's really helped me cope this week and sort of just escape the seriousness of the world. So I suppose, that's my little strategy. Or the other thing I do is I watch Graham Norton. And that's the other thing, like if I need to escape. So find your escape. I think we all need to find our escape. But that's what's keeping me distracted.
Well, I've been trying to do a little parenting, which is something I haven't been doing a lot of. What I'm guilty of doing is trying to come up with big policies, and then not getting involved in the nitty-gritties, right? And I've been trying to help one of my kids feel better about what they do. Right? So I've kind of given them some advice, trying to push them in the direction of trying to help them design for success in their life, design so that they can be set up to succeed. And I've also tried to help them look at success in a different way as well, because I think we're frequently just overwhelmed by the big task that's at hand. There's so many things to do that we end up being depressed that we don't do enough of it. Right? We sit down and we wanted to do this whole thing, and we didn't do much at all. And I've been trying to think about how to get her to look at things and go, I'm succeeding in different ways. The fact that I made a plan is a success. The fact that I did one of the 10 things that I wanted to do is a success. And bit by bit to do things strategically. And I just realized that from a mental health perspective, I think I've always taken it for granted. Because I've always been resilient in that respect. It's something that we really have to be much more aware of and strategic about. I owe it to my eldest daughter, actually, who's someone who's taken control of her life in that way, and is doing so many things right, and being an inspiration to me in terms of what I should do as well. So
Nice.
this idea of mental health, I mean, it's not just a fashionable thing to talk about, because I mean, kids do talk about mental health nowadays, and that's a great thing. But I think there are not enough people who know what to do. So they'll say something, like you got to look after your mental health,
Yeah.
and they actually don't know what they're talking about. And I think
Yeah,
most
what does it
people
mean?
don't. So it's
Yeah.
a set of skills that I think have to be put out in the world, and one of it is self-management. The
Yeah.
other is critical, thinking, and how to
Self-awareness.
sit down and have an argument.
Yes. Yeah. So talking about mental health, next week we're going to have Dion Jensen from the Lion Academy come on specifically to talk about mental health, because I've identified it as such a big issue for so many people right now. And like you say, not everyone is equipped to deal with it. So, so that's going to happen next week. So that'll be a really interesting conversation. All right. We will switch off. Thanks for joining us.
Yep.
Thanks, Joe. And see you next week.